He thought freedom meant a clean start. But on his first night out of prison, the man who swore he'd never steal again met a client waiting in the dark. It wasn't a politician or a rich stranger. It was someone who knew his name before he was born and had come to collect an old debt. The shelter had fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects. A TV played a morning sermon about forgiveness. Elias looked away. The preacher's voice cracked when he said the word repent. That night, he found the note, slipped under his door. Typed, no handwriting. A job, cash payment, no questions. Midnight pickup, Route 19, old gas station. Come alone, he almost laughed. It sounded like a setup, like the kind of thing that ends with duct tape and shovels. But hunger speaks louder than caution. At 11:47 p.m., the bus dropped him off in the middle of nowhere. The station was dead. A single flickering light, a vending machine that hadn't worked in years. The wind carried the smell of rain and something else. Sulfur, faint but sharp, like burnt matches. A black sedan waited by the pumps, windows tinted, engine running. He hesitated. Then the passenger window slid down, slow and deliberate. Inside, a man sat in the dark. No phone, no dashboard lights, just a pale face faintly illuminated by the overhead lamp. His eyes were the wrong kind of calm. Elias Ward, the man said. Not asked, said. Get in. Elias froze. You know my name? The man smiled. Of course. I've been watching you. Something in that voice, not the tone, but the weight of it, pressed against Elias's chest. He couldn't move, couldn't look away. Job's simple, the man continued. You deliver a package, tonight. No police, no questions. You'll be paid before dawn. Elias nodded without realizing it. His body moved on its own, opening the car door. Inside, the air was colder than outside. He shivered. The man handed him a small black box wrapped in leather, no markings. Heavy for its size. What's in it? The man's smile widened. Temptation. The word hung in the air like a curse. Elias blinked, and for a fraction of a second, the man's face seemed to flicker, the pupils stretching, the teeth sharper than before. But when Elias blinked again, it was gone. Just an ordinary stranger. Drive east, the man said softly. You'll know when to stop. The dashboard clock read 3 a.m. The engine hummed low. As Elias pulled onto the road, he caught the faintest echo behind him, fingernails dragging across glass. The road unspooled like a vein. Mile markers flickered past, pale and identical. The leather box sat on the passenger seat and refused to be ignored. He kept glancing, the way you watch a sleeping dog that might decide to bite. He touched it at a stoplight. Heat pushed through the leather, then vanished. He snatched his hand back and laughed once, short and ugly. Stress, nerves, nothing more. A radio ad cracked through static. A man's voice, too close to the mic, whispered, "If you want the full story, subscribe now." Stay with us. Elias shut it off. The silence that followed leaned in. Rain began near the county line, slicking the asphalt, turning the world to watercolor. He passed a bus stop where a woman cupped a broken umbrella over a sleeping child. Ordinary life. Then the smell slid in, sweet and wrong. Perfume with an undertow of sulfur. He rolled the window down. It stayed. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. A text. Keep right at the fork. No map, no link. He did as it said. The temperature dropped, breath fogging the glass. The heater wheezed without warming him. The leather rubbed the vinyl as if it had moved. He told himself it hadn't. He told himself a lot, like he had in court. You can say a thing often enough that it sounds true. That never makes it real. A hospital sign glowed ahead. Letters flickered like a failing heart monitor. Elias remembered nights stealing catalytic converters there. He had learned the angles, the shadows, the exits. He had also learned to look away when a janitor knelt to pray behind the dumpsters. He'd told himself it was a habit, like smoking, not a message, not for him. Another text, slow down, his foot lifted without consent. The engine settled into a low hum. He heard a clock, though the car had none, tick, 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 as if time itself rode in back with wet shoes. He stopped at a gas station with moth-eaten lights. The attendant slept behind bulletproof glass. Elias bought coffee that tasted like burned paper. He didn't want caffeine. He wanted the normal act of paying for something honestly. The receipt curled in his hand, still warm. On the back, a pen-scratched word, confess. When he looked up, a man stood by the air pump, watching him. No umbrella, no coat. Rain slid off him and left his clothes dry. The man raised a hand. Fingernails clicked softly against metal. Elias blinked. The man was gone. In his place, a stray dog scratched at nothing. He drove on. The road tightened into neighborhoods, then unraveled into a small town with tired porches and chain-link fences. A laundromat murmured. A church marquee read, "We're still here." He found the street without looking. He felt it before he saw it. A cul-de-sac where porch lights burned with the same wattage, the same apology. Another text. Stop. He parked outside a blue house with a sagging step and shoes lined on the mat in disciplined pairs. Through the window, a woman at a table making lunches. Peanut butter, neat squares. Her hands moved methodically, almost prayerful. The perfume smell, that same scent, slipped through the vents and sat beside him like a person. He picked up the box. The leather was cool now. He opened the door, and night met him with hospital cold air. Somewhere nearby, a clock struck 3 a.m. The sound was exact, deliberate. On the porch, he raised his hand to knock. Fingernails on glass sounded behind him, a soft drag across the car window he had just closed. The hair on his arms lifted, one by one, as if counted. He turned. The street was empty. Only the blue house. Only the rain. Only the job he had chosen to do. He knocked once. The door began to open, inch by inch, as if something inside had been waiting at the threshold for years and had just now found his name. The door opened wider than it should have, as if pushed from both sides at once. Elias blinked against the kitchen light. The woman didn't look surprised to see him. She only wiped her hands on a towel and said, "You're late." Her voice was ordinary, warm, even. That was the worst part. She didn't ask who he was or what he carried. She just turned back to the sandwiches. "He's waiting in the other room." Elias hesitated at the threshold. The floorboards creaked as if they knew his weight already. The box pulsed faintly in his grip, not with sound, but with the same awareness a heartbeat has when you try not to think about it. "Who's waiting?" he asked. She didn't answer. She placed another sandwich in a paper bag, her motions precise, mechanical. The radio beside her whispered a hymn out of tune. When she spoke again, it was to the air. "Everyone comes here eventually." Elias looked down the hall. A shadow bled under a closed door. Not cast by light, but thick enough to move like smoke underwater. He swallowed hard. "I was told to deliver this." "Yes," the woman said, smiling now. Her teeth were small, almost childlike. "He never forgets what's owed." Elias stepped closer to the door. The ticking started again, that invisible clock counting 3 a.m. over and over, like time stuck in a loop. He reached for the handle. Cold metal, colder than it should be. From behind him came the soft click of fingernails against the counter. He turned. The woman's hands rested flat, but her nails were bleeding at the cuticles, red half-moons soaking the towel. She didn't seem to notice. He opened the door. Inside, no one. Just a chair facing the wall, and above it, a mirror too tall for the room. The glass shimmered faintly, as if it breathed. Elias caught his reflection, and for a moment, it wasn't him. The man in the mirror wore the same clothes, the same tired eyes, but the smile was wrong. It belonged to someone who had never once felt sorry. Then, softly, from behind the reflection, a voice. "You've done this before, Elias. Only difference now is, this time, you know who you're stealing for." The mirror fogged at the words. He stepped back, the box trembling in his hand. The air turned heavy, syrup thick with heat and sulfur. His pulse tripped. "Who are you?" The voice came from everywhere. The first employer, the last customer, the debt collector of souls. The reflection blinked slower than he did. Its mouth stayed open a little too long. Elias stumbled backward into the hall. The woman was gone. The radio played static now, but beneath it, faintly, he could hear her humming the same broken hymn. He ran for the door. The house seemed to stretch, each step pulling longer, the distance expanding like breath in a lung. He burst outside into the cold, gasping. The street was empty. His car idled where he left it. On the seat, the box was gone. He stood there until the ticking stopped, until dawn, until he realized he'd never seen another house on that street. And when he checked the map later, there was no Route 19, no blue house, only a black smudge where the satellite image failed to load. By sunrise, Elias was 30 miles from the town that no longer existed. His phone battery had died somewhere around dawn, but even before that, no map app could find Route 19. It was as if the road had been erased, not deleted, but unmade. He parked at a rest stop, trembling hands wrapped around a vending machine coffee. The caffeine did nothing. Every time he blinked, he saw that mirror, the reflection that smiled when he didn't. He told himself he was tired, hallucinating, that maybe the woman had been part of some con, a way to make him think he'd lost something valuable so they could follow him, rob him later. It was easier than believing what he actually felt, that he'd delivered something not meant for the world. A janitor passed by, whistling, normal, grounding. Elias nodded to him, desperate for contact. The man didn't nod back, just pushed his mop across the tiles, leaving streaks of something darker than water. Elias rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, the streaks were gone, clean floor. He sat on the curb, head in his hands. The sky looked like dull metal. Traffic hissed in the distance, a reminder that the world kept moving for everyone else. Then the phone buzzed, though it should have been dead. Unknown number. The message read, "Payment received. Expect another job soon." He dropped the phone. It landed screen up, glowing faintly, showing 3 a.m., but it was morning. Birds chirped. People walked dogs. He couldn't breathe right. The sulfur smell had returned, masked by cheap soap and engine fumes. He pressed his sleeve to his face, trying to block it. When he looked up, a priest stood by the gas pumps, speaking quietly with a woman in a nurse's uniform. Elias's eyes locked on the man's collar, the clean white square. It looked like hope. He walked over. "Father," he said, voice shaking, "do you believe in the devil?" The priest studied him for a moment. "I believe we name what we fear," he said. "Sometimes the names answer back." Elias stared, throat dry. If someone made a deal, without knowing, could they undo it? The priest tilted his head. "No one ever says no by accident." Elias backed away. The nurse turned toward him, and he froze, her perfume. The same sweet sulfuric scent from the house. She smiled politely, then kept walking. Her fingernails were bandaged, red seeping through the gauze. He left the car and started walking. Nowhere in particular, just away. Each mile blurred into the next until the highway narrowed into cracked asphalt and silence. A sign leaned at the shoulder, dead end. He laughed, half sob, half breath. Figures, wind stirred the weeds. The laughter died in his throat. A voice, his own, whispered from behind him, perfectly mimicked. "Turn around, Elias. You forgot your change." He turned. No one there. Just the black box sitting in the middle of the road, dry despite the dew. He didn't touch it, didn't move. Only listened as the unseen clock began again. Tick, 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 counting down to something that already happened. He didn't pick up the box. He left it sitting there like an open wound in the road. But when he reached the next town, it was waiting for him again on the motel bed, wrapped the same way, untouched. Elias stood in the doorway for a long time. The television flickered, showing static that hissed like breath through teeth. He unplugged it. The static kept going, faint but alive, whispering under the hum of the air conditioner. He sat on the edge of the bed. His reflection in the dark screen looked thinner, bruised beneath the eyes. "You're losing it," he muttered. The reflection smiled a moment later. He tore the blanket off the bed, covering the screen. The phone on the nightstand lit up, battery still dead, showing a missed call, nitrogen monoxide name. He answered anyway. Silence. Then, a faint crackle. "You left something behind, Elias." The same calm, deep voice from the car. He stood up, heart punching through his ribs. "What do you want from me?" "Only what you've always wanted," the voice said. "Work, purpose, payment." Elias swallowed hard. "You tricked me." A low chuckle. "No one tricks the willing." The line clicked dead. He threw the phone against the wall. It didn't break. It only slid down slowly, screen flashing once more with the words, 3 a.m. He couldn't stay there. He grabbed his jacket and left, walking fast down the quiet street. Neon signs buzzed. Dogs barked from unseen yards. Every window looked like an eye pretending to sleep. He passed a pawn shop. The display window was empty except for one item, a mirror, tall and narrow, the frame charred as if burned. A small paper tag hung from the corner. It said, "Tavel, deep pickup tonight." He didn't stop. At the end of the block, a payphone rang. He didn't remember the last time he'd heard one work. He walked faster, but it kept ringing, the sound following him, bouncing between buildings. He turned the corner, another phone. Still ringing. The wind had gone still. Even the insects had quieted, as if the world held its breath to listen. He picked up. "What?" A woman's voice answered, soft and calm. "He's proud of you, Elias." "Who?" "You know who." "I didn't finish the delivery." A pause. "Then, you did. You just don't remember how." He slammed the receiver down. The sound echoed longer than it should have, stretching through the air like a scream swallowed by water. Back at the motel, the door was open. The light inside flickered. He stepped in, heart crawling. The bed was empty, the box gone. But written on the bathroom mirror, in steam though the air was cold, were 3 words, "Next job soon." The mirror fogged again, and beneath the words, faint but visible, something new formed, a reflection that wasn't his. The same pale man from the car, smiling with patient hunger. Elias turned off the light. It didn't matter. The reflection stayed. He didn't sleep. The sun came and went like a skipped heartbeat. When he opened the nightstand drawer, he found the motel Bible. Its cover was cracked, pages swollen from moisture. Someone had underlined words in red ink, not the kind that fades. He read the first mark, "And the devil, taking him up into an high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world." The second, "All this power will I give thee." The third, "For it is written." Elias closed it fast. The ink bled faintly through the paper, the red lines trembling as if still being drawn. He shoved it back in the drawer and locked the door. A knock came 5 minutes later. He froze. "Housekeeping," a voice said. Too flat, too patient. He didn't answer. Another knock, harder, then silence. He looked through the peephole. No one. Just the hallway, empty and buzzing with the same dim hum as the television static. When he turned back, the Bible sat on the bed, open this time. A new line underlined in red. He went out and wept bitterly. He didn't touch it. couldn't. Instead, he opened the curtains. The parking lot was empty except for one black sedan parked beneath the sign. Its engine wasn't running, but smoke rose from the hood anyway, slow and white. He thought of leaving, just walking, taking the bus, heading anywhere with crowds and noise and cell service. But he knew it wouldn't matter. The jobs would find him. He sat down, head in his hands. "What do you want me to do?" he whispered. The air conditioner clicked. A voice answered softly through its vent, same tone as the client's, smooth and dry as dust. "Deliver again." He stood slowly. "To who?" "To yourself," the voice said. "You keep trying to give me what's already mine." The vent rattled once, then went still. The air turned cold enough that he could see his breath. He turned the Bible over, meaning to hide it again, but a folded note fell from between the pages. Printed, clean, no handwriting, just like the first one. "Pick up tonight, same route." "Don't be late," his phone buzzed. Battery still dead, but a notification appeared anyway, message received. "Payment pending." He laughed, hollow and shaking. "You can't own me," he said to the room. The lamp beside him flickered once, then again. Then every bulb in the room went black. A single sound rose from the bathroom, a slow scraping against the mirror, like nails carving glass. He didn't go in, not yet. But he could smell it, perfume and sulfur, layered over bleach. Then the whisper came, right against his ear this time. "You already cashed the check." The room lights flickered back on. The Bible was gone. Only a small red smear remained on the bedsheet, shaped like a fingerprint. By dusk, Elias was driving again. He didn't remember deciding to leave, only the sound of his car door slamming. The Bible gone, the note in his pocket folded like a confession. The road ahead stretched flat and endless, no signs, no exits, just gray sky pressing low on the windshield. He'd stopped checking the clock. It didn't help. Every time he looked, it said 3 a.m., no matter the sun's position. He turned the radio on for noise. A preacher's voice came through the static, familiar somehow. He walked still. Not with horns or flame, but in offers that sound too easy. In payments that don't require receipt. Elias twisted the dial. Every station had the same man. Every voice said the same thing, with the same rhythm. Finally, he shut it off. Silence was worse. He passed a sign bent backward by the wind. Only one word remained legible. "Confess." The steering wheel felt slick. He looked down. His palms were bleeding, small cuts along the lifelines, as if something had clawed outward from beneath the skin. He wiped them on his jeans. The blood smelled faintly of smoke. He saw headlights ahead. A truck stopped sideways across the road. He braked, heart hammering. A man stood beside it, waving. Elias lowered his window. "You all right?" The man nodded. "Tire blew. You heading east?" "Yeah. Need to rest?" The stranger asked. "There's a diner a few miles up. Best coffee this side of hell." The phrase hit too cleanly. Elias almost laughed, but the man's eyes were wrong, not evil, just hollow, as if emptied to make room for something else. "I'll manage," Elias said. The man smiled, lips barely moving. Everyone says that, until they don't. Elias drove past him. When he looked in the mirror, the truck was gone. The road behind was clean and straight, no skid marks, no lights. He reached the diner anyway. It was there, chrome walls, buzzing neon sign, Lucille's. Inside, the smell of burnt sugar and coffee. A waitress with red hair and tired eyes poured him a cup before he spoke. "Rough night?" she asked. "You could say that. Heading nowhere in particular?" He frowned. "How'd you know?" She smiled faintly. "Everyone who comes through here is." He stirred his coffee, but the spoon clinked against something solid. Inside the cup was a small black object, leather, square, perfectly dry. The same box. He shoved back from the counter, chair screeching. The waitress didn't flinch. "Don't make a scene," she said quietly. He hates drama. Who? She leaned closer. Her perfume hit him first, sweet, metallic, sulfur under honey. You already know his name. Elias backed away, shaking his head. The other diners sat perfectly still, coffee halfway to their lips, frozen mid-breath. Only the ticking of a wall clock moved the air. 3 a.m., he stumbled outside. The sky above the diner was wrong, too low, too dark, stars rearranging like watching eyes. He ran to the car, hands slipping on the door handle. Inside, the black box waited on the passenger seat, humming softly like an animal asleep. He whispered, "What do you want from me?" From somewhere beneath the floorboards of the car, a calm, patient voice answered, "You said yes once. That's all it takes." The air turned freezing. The windshield fogged. On the glass, a handprint appeared. 5 perfect marks burned into the frost. By dawn, Elias had no idea where the highway had taken him. Signs were missing, towns unmarked. He stopped only when he saw something familiar, a mailbox, dented and leaning, with his last name on it, Ward. He stared at it, breath caught between disbelief and recognition. His old house. The one sold years ago after his arrest. The front gate hung crooked. The grass had grown wild, swallowing the path to the door. He shouldn't have gone in, but he did. Inside, everything was the same. The kitchen counter scarred from his knife, the faded calendar still on the month he'd been taken away. The air smelled of dust, but beneath it, faintly, sulfur and lilac. On the table sat the black box, waiting. He didn't touch it. Instead, he found a framed photo by the window. His mother, holding him as a child, her smile half shadowed by light. Someone had drawn over her eyes with black marker. He whispered, "Stop it," but his voice came out cracked, too small. Then from the hall, a door creaked open. He followed the sound. Each step echoed too long, like walking down a tunnel. The bedroom light flicked on by itself. A man sat on the edge of the bed, his own face, older, hollowed out, eyes black around the edges like soot. The older Elias smiled weakly. "Took you long enough." Elias froze. What is this?" "It's the end of what you started," the reflection said. "You took the job, didn't you? You delivered what wasn't yours. I didn't know. Doesn't matter. You said yes." The room dimmed, corners bleeding into shadow. The mirror on the wall caught both of them, but in the reflection, there was only one figure sitting on the bed. Elias whispered, "What was in the box?" His double leaned forward, voice flattening into something not human. "A name. Yours." He stepped back. "No, that's..." But before he could finish, his reflection stood, moving when he didn't. The thing smiled wider now, teeth too white, too sharp. "You delivered yourself. The rest is bookkeeping." Elias stumbled against the dresser, knocking the photo frame to the floor. The glass cracked. From somewhere deep in the house, the ticking began again, 3 measured beats, repeating. He turned to run. The hallway was longer now, stretching past sight, doors multiplying on both sides. Each one whispered as he passed, "Open me. Open me." He didn't. He burst outside into cold daylight. His car waited, engine idling though he hadn't left the keys inside. On the passenger seat, the Bible, open to a blank page. Slowly, red ink bled through from beneath, forming new words. "Delivered." The page smoked faintly at the edges, curling inward. He slammed it shut, heart racing. When he looked up, the house was gone. Just a field of scorched grass where it had stood. And from far off, the faint echo of fingernails dragging against glass, patient, steady, closer. The road stretched for miles, never quite ending, never quite giving him the next destination. The wind pushed at his back as if it knew the way, but Elias could not make himself follow. His hands gripped the wheel like a lifeline, but every mile he drove, he felt further from anything real. The car radio crackled to life again, the same voice that had haunted him, smooth and unhurried. It whispered through the static, "You're tired, Elias. Tired of running. It's okay. You can rest now." He slammed the button to turn it off, but the voice didn't stop. It was in his head, the words echoing with a patient finality. "It's not too late to accept the invitation." His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The black sedan followed him, trailing silently, its headlights like twin eyes watching. Elias could not remember when it had appeared, but now it was too close, its presence a cold weight pressing against him. He turned off the highway, desperate to get away. The street signs were familiar, but they had changed names somehow. This wasn't the town he remembered. A park loomed ahead, the trees bare and twisted like fingers reaching for him. The streetlights flickered as he drove in, the smell of damp earth rising with the sharp tang of sulfur. He parked in front of a wrought iron gate, its bars twisted, bent inward like something trying to escape. The sign above read, "St. Michael's Cemetery." Elias stared at it. The name felt wrong. This wasn't the cemetery where his father was buried. But he felt the pull, the quiet insistence that this was where he needed to go. As he stepped out of the car, the air grew heavier, thick with the scent of burnt incense and something older, darker. The ground beneath his feet felt soft, shifting. It wasn't natural. Nothing here was. He walked toward the gate, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the weight of the earth beneath him. The cemetery was too quiet, too still, as if the world had paused just for him. He reached the entrance, but it swung open before he could touch the rusted handle. The man in the black suit was waiting for him. "Come inside," the client said, his voice a whisper that seemed to vibrate in the air itself. He stood just beyond the gate, not quite inside, yet not quite outside either. His smile never wavered, but his eyes were dark, endless pools. "I told you," Elias said. "I'm done." The client's smile widened. "You're not done, Elias. You've only just begun." The ground beneath Elias's feet shifted again, and he felt the first real fear claw up his spine. He wanted to run, to leave, but the client's gaze held him in place. The smell of perfume and sulfur filled the air once more, sharp and nauseating. "You've been marked," the client continued, his voice almost tender, "and marks like yours never fade. You can't undo it. Not now." Elias turned, ready to leave. But the gate had disappeared. The road behind him had vanished into the trees, leaving only the twisted paths of the cemetery in front of him. "No escape now, Elias," the client said, his tone growing darker. "This is where it ends for you." The ground seemed to ripple, the air thickening with the presence of something that didn't belong. He could feel it around him, the crushing weight of it. The client stepped closer, his fingers brushing Elias's arm, and with the touch, a sharp pain shot through Elias's chest. He gasped, stumbling backward. The pain spread like fire, burning through him from the inside out. Then, as quickly as it had come, the pain faded. But something else remained. A whisper. "You said yes. You chose to deliver." Elias could hardly breathe. The client was smiling now, but it wasn't a smile. It was something else, something worse. Then the ground shifted again. The cemetery around him seemed to stretch, the tombstones leaning toward him, the sky turning a sickly shade of red. "You can't outrun it," the client whispered. "This is what happens when you make a deal with the devil." Elias's legs buckled beneath him as the ground seemed to ripple underfoot. He stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat. The cemetery around him had twisted, becoming something darker, its paths winding like veins. The tombstones leaned at angles that shouldn't have been possible. Some of them whispered his name, faint murmurs that carried on the wind, making the air heavier with every breath he took. The client stood at the center of it all, his smile unchanged. "It's all here for you now, Elias," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something insidious in its cadence, something that made the ground feel like it was pulling at him. "I never wanted this," Elias choked out. He tried to take a step, but his feet wouldn't move. He was frozen in place. like the cemetery itself was holding him down. The client's grin deepened. No one ever does. But that doesn't stop it from happening. The air grew colder, the smell of sulfur stronger now, mingling with something sickly sweet. Ilias's head swam, and the weight of what had happened began to settle in his chest like a stone. The deal, the delivery, the box, it was all leading to this. "You made your choice, Ilias," the client said softly, stepping closer. "You agreed to take the job. That's all it takes. You sold your soul, and now it's mine." Ilias's heart pounded in his chest and his body trembled. "I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing." The client tilted his head as though considering the excuse. "Everyone says that," he said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "It doesn't matter. A choice is a choice. The moment you said yes, you sealed your fate." Ilias closed his eyes, trying to shake off the dizziness. The air around him was thick with an oppressive weight, as if the very atmosphere was tightening around him. He could feel it pressing against his skin, suffocating him. "What happens now?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The client's eyes glinted with a dark satisfaction. "Now you pay. It's the only way. Every action has a consequence. Every sin, a price." The ground beneath Ilias seemed to quake, and the shadows of the tombstones stretched, curling toward him like fingers. His legs gave way, and he fell to his knees. The pain in his chest flared up again, sharp and cold. "You wanted purpose," the client continued. "You wanted payment. You wanted to fill that emptiness inside you, but now you see. There's no satisfaction in what I give." Ilias's throat tightened. "I was just trying to survive." The client leaned down, his face inches from Ilias's. "Survival doesn't matter when you've sold your soul for it." Ilias recoiled, the words sinking into him like nails. The client's smile was wide, but it wasn't kind. It was cruel, predatory, like something that had been watching him for a long time, waiting for him to make the wrong choice. The air thickened, and Ilias could feel his strength fading. His vision blurred, the cemetery around him shifting in and out of focus. The sound of nails scraping against glass echoed through his skull, and for the first time, he understood that it wasn't a sound, it was a presence. The devil had always been here, waiting for him. Ilias gasped, trying to push himself up, but the ground held him down. The cemetery was no longer a place of death, it was a prison, his prison. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't want this. I don't want to be yours." The client's expression softened. "Too late, Ilias. The moment you took the box, you became mine." The shadows around Ilias grew darker, thicker. The whispers in the air grew louder, their voices becoming more frantic, more insistent. They were all calling to him, pulling at him. "You can't escape," the client said, his voice low, almost a growl. "I gave you everything you wanted. And now you're mine, forever." Ilias's heart was a drum in his chest, but his hands, his legs, everything about him felt numb. The world around him seemed to collapse, leaving only the client, standing in front of him like a shadow cast by the very depths of hell. With one final breath, Ilias closed his eyes, letting the darkness take him. Ilias opened his eyes, but the world didn't feel real. It was as though he was floating, his body weightless, disconnected from the earth. The air around him was thick with a suffocating heat, and the ground beneath him was a shifting blur of shadows and light. For a moment, he thought he was dead. But then, the world snapped back into focus. He was lying on the cold, hard floor of a room he didn't recognize. The walls were made of stone, ancient and crumbling, and the faint smell of sulfur lingered in the air. A single light flickered overhead, casting long wavering shadows across the floor. He sat up, his body aching as if he had been dragged through a storm. His clothes were torn, his hands covered in blood, but it didn't feel like his own. The blood was warm, and it stained the floor beneath him. He tried to move, but his limbs felt like they belonged to someone else. His body didn't obey him. He couldn't feel his fingers, couldn't feel his toes. It was as if he had been remade, as if he no longer recognized himself. The room was silent except for the faint sound of a clock ticking, the same clock that had haunted him throughout this entire nightmare. 3 a.m. Elias swallowed hard, forcing himself to stand, the weight of his own body pulling at him. He took one step, then another, his legs weak, but determined. The floor beneath him creaked with every movement. In the corner of the room, a figure stood. A man. It was the client. The same tall, pale figure, his smile wide and unyielding. He was watching Elias with a cold, empty gaze, his eyes reflecting the faintest trace of amusement. "You're awake," the client said, his voice as smooth as before, but now there was something more in it, something that twisted like a knife. "What is this?" Elias rasped, his voice cracked from the silence. The client stepped forward, his smile never fading. "This is your new reality, Elias. You've crossed the line, and now there's no going back." Elias backed away, his heart pounding. No, I can't be here. I don't belong here." The client laughed softly. "Oh, you belong here more than you know. You've already given yourself to me. You don't remember, but you accepted the offer. Everything you've ever wanted. Now you're mine. You always were." Elias stumbled backward, feeling his mind unravel. I didn't mean it. I didn't know what I was doing." The client's eyes glinted with a darkness that seemed to draw the light out of the room. "It doesn't matter. That's what they always say, isn't it? But you knew. You knew from the moment you took the job. You chose this. You delivered what was never yours to give. And now you'll pay the price." Elias's legs gave way again, and he collapsed onto the floor. His body felt heavier than it had ever felt before. Every breath was a struggle, and his chest burned like fire. The blood in his veins felt like ice. "No, please," Elias whispered, his voice barely audible. He felt the weight of the air pressing in on him, suffocating him. The client watched him, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "You'll never escape, Elias. You can't outrun your own choices." Elias closed his eyes, tears burning his face. He tried to scream, but nothing came out. The room seemed to close in on him, and the shadows grew darker, swallowing the light. The clock ticked louder now, filling his mind with its rhythmic beat. Each tick was a reminder of the price he had paid. He had made a choice. He had chosen the easy way, the way that seemed like salvation, but it had only led him here, to this place, to this fate. "Please," he begged, his voice trembling. "I'll do anything. Just let me go." The client's smile widened, and for the first time there was a hint of pity in his eyes. "You'll never go, not now. Not after what you've done." Elias felt the darkness closing in, the room spinning around him. The air thickened, and he felt his own spirit begin to unravel, slipping from his body like sand through his fingers. "You'll never be free," the client whispered. "Not in this life. Not in the next." The last thing Elias heard before the darkness took him completely was the ticking of the clock. 3 a.m. Elias woke, but it wasn't the same awakening. His eyes opened to darkness, not the soft twilight of a bedroom, but a black void. The air around him was cold, and when he inhaled, the breath caught in his chest, as if the very air was sharp and unyielding. He stood, but the floor beneath him gave no sense of solid ground. He felt as if he were floating, suspended in a void that stretched forever, with no walls, no ceiling, only the heavy silence pressing in on him. The smell of sulfur and decay wrapped itself around him like a shroud. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, a distant voice echoed through the emptiness, soft but unmistakable. "You're here now, Elias." His heart raced, his pulse quickening in the silence. He spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but there was no one. No figure, no shape, only endless darkness. "You were always meant to be here," the voice continued. It was the same voice, the client, the devil. It came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "This is the price, Elias. You thought you could outrun me. You thought you could escape. But you can't." Elias dropped to his knees, his breath shallow and panicked. "Please," he whispered, though he didn't know to whom. "Please, I never wanted this." The voice seemed to laugh, though it was a hollow sound, devoid of any true joy. "No one ever wants this. But everyone chooses it. You did, Elias. You chose this path. You always knew what the cost would be." Suddenly, the darkness around him began to shift. It was subtle at first. A small flicker of light here, a ripple in the void there. Then, slowly, the world began to form around him, twisted and distorted. He was standing in the middle of a street now, or at least what seemed like a street. The pavement was cracked and worn, the buildings leaning to the side, decaying as if they had been abandoned for centuries. The wind blew, but it didn't carry the scent of fresh air. It carried ash and the faint scent of burning flesh. Elias staggered forward, his legs trembling beneath him. He had to find a way out. There had to be a way back. But as he walked, the streets began to change. The buildings grew darker, more monstrous, their windows now black pits staring at him like eyes. The faces of the people who had once lived here, who had once walked these streets, were now twisted and malformed, their expressions contorted in agony. They reached out to him, their hands groping toward him, their eyes filled with a hunger he couldn't name. And then he saw her. A woman stood at the end of the street, bathed in an eerie light that seemed to come from nowhere. Her face was obscured, but her silhouette was unmistakable. It was the woman from the motel, the one who had handed him the box. She was standing still, waiting. But when Elias took a step toward her, she turned and began walking away, her footsteps slow and deliberate, echoing in the stillness. He followed, desperate to catch up, but no matter how fast he moved, she always stayed just out of reach. Her perfume, the sickly sweet scent of lilac and sulfur, hung in the air around him, making his stomach churn. Finally, when he couldn't take it any longer, he screamed her name, but the sound of his voice felt distant, muted, as if it were lost to the void. She stopped. The woman turned slowly, her face still hidden in shadow. But her eyes were the same as the client's, empty, black, endless. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice cold and hollow. Elias froze. "What do you want from me?" She smiled, a smile that wasn't hers, a smile that belonged to something else. "Something darker. You," she said softly. "You belong to him now. And there's no going back." Her words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elias's chest tightened, and for the first time, he felt the weight of what he had done. The choices he had made, the deal he had accepted. And as the shadows closed in around him, he understood. There was no escape. He had already been claimed. The woman's smile stretched, growing wider until it almost split her face in two. Elias felt his heart stop. He couldn't breathe. His legs felt as if they were filled with lead, and every step he took toward her seemed to stretch the distance farther away. She wasn't walking anymore. She was waiting, watching. He whispered, his voice hoarse. "I don't understand. I didn't mean to." "I didn't." The woman stepped closer, her every movement fluid, effortless. She didn't hurry. She didn't need to. "You don't have to understand, Elias," she said, her voice soft as the night air. "You already chose." Her eyes, dark, black, endless, bored into him. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of something in them. Regret? Sorrow? But it was gone before he could name it. She was the devil's agent, and she wasn't here to save him. She was here to collect. He backed away, but the ground seemed to shift beneath him, and the shadows grew longer, curling toward him like living things. The streets he had once walked now felt like they were closing in, the buildings looming over him like monstrous twisted shapes. The faces of the people, the ones who had once lived here, stared at him from behind cracked windows, their eyes wide, their mouths open in silent screams. "You can't run from this," she said, her voice no longer kind but laced with something colder. "You belong to him now. You've always belonged to him. Every choice you made led you here." Elias's legs felt numb. His vision blurred, and for a brief moment, he thought he might pass out. The air was thick, suffocating, and the smell of sulfur grew stronger. His hands trembled at his sides. "I didn't know," he gasped. "I didn't know it would be like this." The woman tilted her head, her smile widening. "No one does. No one ever does, but it doesn't matter. You wanted freedom. You wanted power, and now you have both in a way." Elias couldn't speak. His throat was dry. His chest felt tight as if the walls were closing in, pressing the very air out of his lungs. "You're here," the woman continued, her eyes never leaving his. "You're trapped in your own choices, Elias, and you're not the first." She reached out a hand, brushing the air in front of him like she was about to touch his face, but she stopped just short. "Look around you. This place, this world, it's where all the broken souls end up. The ones who thought they could cheat their way out. The ones who thought they could get something for nothing." Elias blinked, trying to understand what she was saying. His mind was heavy with confusion and fear. I didn't want to be here. I just wanted to survive." The woman's eyes darkened, and she took a step back. "You survived, Elias, but at what cost?" A gust of wind swept through the empty street, and for a moment, the air seemed to crack with static. The shadows around them grew thicker, darker, until the whole street was swallowed by the night. Elias turned, his heart racing. Behind him, a door had appeared in one of the buildings, an old wooden door, cracked and faded. The light from within spilled out, casting long shadows across the street. "It's time," the woman said, her voice now low, almost pitying. "You've reached the end. There's no going back." He didn't know what to do. His legs moved before his mind could catch up, his feet carrying him toward the door as though they had already made the decision for him. He reached the door and opened it, stepping inside. The room was dark. The walls were covered with old, yellowed paper, peeling at the edges. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of something decaying lingered. At the center of the room, a chair sat empty, a single chair waiting for him. He didn't want to sit in it. He didn't want to be here, not in this room, not with the woman and her smile and the whispers of the shadows. But something pushed him forward, something invisible yet heavy. He sat. The door slammed shut behind him. "Don't be afraid," the woman's voice echoed from the darkness. "You chose this. You chose him. And now you'll stay here, with the rest of them." Elias felt his heart race in his chest. He tried to speak, to scream, to fight back, but no sound left his mouth. He was trapped. The ticking started again, louder now. The same ticking he had heard since the beginning, since the first night. 3 a.m., the woman's voice echoed in the silence. "This is where you belong. Here, forever." The chair beneath Elias creaked with every small movement, but he couldn't seem to rise. His body was heavy, weighed down by an invisible force that kept him rooted to the spot. The room around him blurred and shifted, and the shadows in the corners seemed to move, reaching, stretching toward him like they had a purpose of their own. He could feel them, even if he couldn't see them. The darkness was alive, and it was closing in. The ticking of the clock, that eternal, suffocating ticking, was louder now, as if it were counting down the last moments of his existence. 3 on them. The door behind him remained shut, and the woman's voice, soft and unfeeling, filled the space. "You've done well, Elias. You've lasted longer than most. But the time has come." He could hear the faint rustling of fabric, the whisper of her footsteps moving closer. He tried to turn, but his neck wouldn't obey. His body felt like it had been chained to the chair. "You've made your choice," she continued, her voice now laced with something darker. "And choices like yours never go unanswered. You wanted power, freedom, survival. But what you've gained, It was never meant to be yours. Elias's throat tightened. He tried to speak, to ask her what she meant, but his voice failed him. All that came out was a strangled gasp. The woman's laugh, cold and mirthless, echoed in the small room. You can't escape, Elias. Not now. Not after what you've done. A pressure built in his chest, as if the weight of his sins was crushing him. He could feel them, the decisions he had made, the lives he had stolen from, the choices he had abandoned in favor of his own survival. The air in the room grew colder, the temperature dropping sharply until Elias could see his breath in front of him. His limbs were stiff and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. 3 a.m. You're not the first, the woman said, her tone almost affectionate. But you will be the last. The last to believe that you could walk away, that you could get something for nothing. You should have known better, Elias. Now there's no going back. Not for you. Elias tried again to rise, to fight whatever force was keeping him rooted to the chair, but his body refused. His muscles were locked in place, his mind desperate to move but unable to. She stepped closer, and for the first time, Elias saw her face, not the shadowed figure he had seen before, but the full, twisted form of her. Her eyes were black, hollow, like empty pits leading to nowhere. Her smile, wide and cruel, was too much to bear. You see, Elias, she whispered, her voice now soft, almost tender. This is the price of temptation, of sin. The price of a soul that was never truly free. You've been marked from the very beginning. Elias opened his mouth to scream, to beg, but no sound escaped. His voice was gone. And then, the shadows moved closer, no longer just figments of the dark, but real, tangible things, coiling around his arms and legs, their touch cold and sharp. His body jerked, but the shadows held him tight, pinning him to the chair as if he were nothing more than prey. The woman's laugh echoed again, growing louder, more deafening. You thought you could outrun it, she said. You thought you could escape, but you didn't. No one can. And now you will stay with us forever. The price is paid. The shadows constricted tighter, and Elias felt his chest tighten, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He wanted to scream, to shout, but there was nothing left inside him. He was already lost. The world around him began to disintegrate, the walls crumbling like dust, the light flickering as if it were nothing more than a memory. The room he had once been in was gone. The street outside was gone. Everything was gone. And all that remained was the ticking of the clock, growing louder and louder until it drowned out everything else. 3 a.m. The air was thick with a suffocating heat. Elias couldn't feel his body anymore, couldn't remember what it was like to have weight, to walk, to move. He was suspended in a void, floating in a place beyond time, beyond reality. His thoughts were a blur, fragments of memories colliding with the black void around him. And then, slowly, like an echo from a place long forgotten, the ticking began again. 3 a.m. It was there, always there. Even here, in the endless blackness. Elias tried to scream, but his mouth was sewn shut. His body had become nothing more than a vessel, floating in the darkness, carried by an unseen force. Every ounce of him screamed for release, for freedom, but there was no escape. The woman's voice echoed through the void. She wasn't standing next to him, no. She was in him, around him, a part of the darkness itself. You belong to him now, Elias, she whispered, her voice cold and sweet like poison. You always have. The words slammed into him, heavier than any physical blow. He wanted to deny it, to say it wasn't true, but deep down he knew it was. He had sold his soul long ago. The deal, the choices, the temptation, it had all led to this. He tried to remember his life before it all went wrong. The small moments of normalcy, the stolen glances, the mundane days. He had been so sure that survival was the only thing that mattered, but it had cost him everything. The world around him began to twist, the darkness folding into itself. Shadows turned into shapes, into memories, into faces. His mother, his father, the people he had hurt, the ones he had betrayed. They all stood before him, their eyes hollow, their faces gaunt, silent, watching, waiting. The client appeared in the distance. Not a man, not a figure, but something else. Something vast and ancient, clothed in shadow. His presence was overwhelming, crushing. The very air trembled around him, and Elias could feel his soul straining against the invisible chains that bound him. "You think you can fight it, Elias?" The client's voice filled the void, a dark symphony of power and inevitability. "You can't. You belong to me. Your choices have led you here, and now you will stay." The shadows around him tightened, pulling him deeper into the black. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He was a prisoner of his own making. The faces of the people he had wronged, the people who had trusted him, the lives he had stolen, they all turned toward him, their eyes accusing, their voices silent. Elias's mind began to unravel. The weight of the guilt, the pain, the fear, it all crashed into him. It was too much. It was everything he had tried to run from. He wanted to scream. He wanted to beg for mercy, for release. But there was nothing left. No more bargaining, no more second chances. "You are mine," the client said, his voice deep and eternal. "And there is no way out." The void began to twist again, pulling him in, swallowing him whole. And then, for a brief moment, Elias understood. He had made the deal long before he had ever said yes, long before the box, long before the delivery. He had made the choice the moment he decided to survive by any means necessary. He had given up his soul without even realizing it. He had always belonged to the devil, even when he thought he was free. The shadows closed in around him, and the world went black. 3 a.m., and the ticking finally stopped.